Auto theft is not uncommon in Metro Detroit, but when you think of auto theft, do you think of one stealing a car from another, or...
This is organized crime. When you're stealing 12 vehicles at a time, that's not a two-man operation. That's a group. That's a ring. Those vehicles have a destination. They're going somewhere.
Up to 20 cars were stolen from two different places yesterday alone. Why aren't the automakers doing more to stop it? This is the Daily J. I'm Zach Clark. If you've been around Southeast Michigan long enough, a parking lot full of hundreds or thousands of brand new cars fresh off the assembly line isn't unusual. Between Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, there are 12 auto assembly plants across the state, which means the opportunity for thieves can be enticing.
Yesterday morning at around 5 a.m., we received a call from a Chrysler plant at 8 Mile and Mountain Road. The guard at the gate was confronted by a convoy of 6 vehicles of Jeep Wagoneers. He went out and he was going to the gate when they rammed the gate open and took off with 6 of the Jeep Wagoneers. 2 have been recovered, 4 are obviously either possibly out of state or at a chop shop.
That is Warren Police Commander Bill Dwyer referencing the theft of those 6 Jeeps from the Warren truck assembly plant that were stolen Tuesday. Also on Tuesday, thieves made out with up to 15 Ford Mustangs from the Flat Rock assembly plant in Woodhaven. As it turns out, there are 2 kinds of auto theft. The next voice you'll hear belongs to Kyle McPhee. He is the training coordinator from the Michigan Auto Theft Prevention Authority, and he's a retired Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant.
We classify different types of theft as theft for convenience, where someone needs to steal a vehicle to commit another crime or get to one side of town to the other, which they'll abandon that fairly quick and it'll be recovered by law enforcement, usually abandoned. The other is on the commercial side of it, where people are stealing vehicles for profit, whether they're going to a chop shop. Many cars get put into shipping containers and get sent out of the country. So that's on the commercial side of things.
Grand theft auto is a serious crime here in Michigan, just like in other states. A conviction here could land the defendant in prison for up to 10 years and comes with a $15,000 fine. But the thefts we're talking about, where multiple cars are stolen at once, these are not the crimes of convenience. There is much more going on here.
There's no question this is organized crime. When you're stealing 12 vehicles at a time, that's not a two-man operation. Okay, that's a group. That's a ring. Those vehicles have a destination that they're going somewhere. That's a challenge for security at these facilities. It's different to prevent one person from coming in there. Now you have 12 or more because you have lookouts and you have people that are going to use one of the vehicles to crash through to make the exodus path. There's several people involved in this. That's going to fall right in the large-scale criminal ring.
This is like RICO stuff, right? Like racketeering.
It would take some serious investigative work to classify it as that, and you'd have to connect a lot of dots. Those are very difficult cases to prove, but not impossible. You have to just link a lot of different criminal aspects together to make that case.
Detective work in general is difficult. It's the detective's job to figure something out without all of the information available to them. And in listening to Commissioner Dwyer talk, commercial auto theft is a bit trickier to solve than your run-of-the-mill stolen car, if that is such a thing.
It's very difficult because, they've got a lead time. I mean, first of all, when they're first reported, they have to do an inventory and determine which ones were taken, because we don't know when we first go over there. We don't know for hours sometimes because they don't have the VIN numbers available. Now, if you're an owner of a vehicle and your car is taken, you got your registration, you got the VIN number, we can do something with that. But they don't have the VIN numbers immediately available to law enforcement, to give law enforcement, so they can move quickly as far as the vehicles.
Do you guys ever end up at chop shops? Because I got to imagine these cars they're not going to somebody's house, right? I don't know that, but I mean, I'm assuming.
Well, some of them are taken out of state. I mean, these are high-priced luxury cars. I mean, the Wagoneers go for $80,000, $90,000. So in all probability, don't really go to a chop shop, but they're probably fake VIN numbers put on them, and they're sold out of state.
Detective work is nothing new to Kyle from the MATP. He did it for years with the state police. Over the last several years, there's been a national dialogue about dwindling police forces. Recruitment numbers are down. The theft of convenience, like you said earlier, usually it happens sometimes in front of somebody. There's a witness, or the car will just be dropped off somewhere else. What's the challenge in these where everything is so planned? Like they're going to steal the car at this time, they're going to take it here, and they're going to get rid of it. What's the challenge for law enforcement?
Challenge for law enforcement is investigative resources. Our numbers are down. We don't have as many officers dedicated to the auto theft crime because it's considered a property crime in Michigan. Resources are being moved constantly, and there's always a crime that seems to be a flavor of the month that pulls in most of the resources, and a lot of times property crimes will be pushed to the back burner. So, challenge for law enforcement is to have enough people to get out on patrol and start looking for stolen cars.
Here's the other issue. This kind of commercial auto theft is hugely profitable. The value of the Mustangs from Flat Rock, about $40,000 a piece. The Jeep Wagoneer starts at about $60,000 up to $100,000. And seeing as they are stolen, the profit margin on the resale is, 100%.
It's big business. When they're stealing in large quantities like that, it's commercial. The end result here is profit for somebody because of the popularity of the vehicles that they're stealing. They're not stealing 1998 Buicks much anymore because those don't bring good price on the street. If you look around at all the big thefts, it's the Mustangs, it's the Hellcats, it's the Wagoneers, high-value targets that you can't steal on the street one at a time in conventional ways. You have to have the key or a key fob, and where a better place to go is to the manufacturer's lot where those keys are with those vehicles.
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't know this. The keys are in the car?
Yes, many manufacturers, it'd be almost impossible to separate the vehicle from a key. Before they transport them, they're just coming off the line. That's a matched thing there between the ignition fobs and the key fobs. Those all have to be programmed. They're all computerized to that vehicle, so it'd be very difficult for them to separate those key fobs from those vehicles and then reunite them when they get to the dealership. So a lot of times they are together as they roll off the line.
You just heard it. I was shocked that the keys were just left in vehicles, even after it was explained to me. I don't leave the keys in my ignition in my own driveway, and I don't have a security guard patrolling my property. When I was much younger, I worked at a car dealership as a porter, and we would keep the keys in a big board, right? And they'd have numbers, and you'd match the number to the car. But again, we're talking about 200 cars, not thousands.
And that still, has to be the case that today's car thieves, the keys are the key. They're going where the keys are because you can't drive one of these cars nowadays without them. So dealerships are a main target. They may go in there and break into the dealership after hours and try to get into the key box and drive the vehicles off the lot. There's several different methods that they use, but it all involves getting the keys for the car. And there's some new theft methods that we're teaching out there that are technology-based with signal interception of the key fob. We haven't seen thefts of that nature much here in Michigan. Around the country, they're starting to show, but for the most part, thieves are still going where the keys are. That's what people have to think now. I was teaching auto theft investigation since 1998, and I used to teach law enforcement officers how to hotwire cars because that was the prevailing way they did it back in the 80s and 90s. Well, they can't do that anymore. They have to come up with a way to get the key or the key fob or intercept the signal to duplicate a new one.
Commissioner Dwyer says if this is to stop, it's going to have to be on the automotive manufacturers to make the vehicles more secure.
I think, quite frankly, that some of these auto manufacturers, can do a better job with their security. I'm not going to get into details, but we've talked to, some of the manufacturers as far as really hardening their security more than what they're doing now. But I think that a lot of these vehicles where there's 5 or 6 taken, be it here or Monroe or wherever, quite frankly, could be prevented.
It almost seems like, and this is an oxymoron, I understand, but it's almost like this is the perfect crime because it's hard to stop and it's hard to catch.
It's not hard to stop if the manufacturers would take the proper action that's been recommended to them. That is to safely secure the vehicles. They're not doing that.
For what it's worth, I reached out to both Ford and Stellantis for this piece. Stellantis did not respond, and Ford would not make anybody available, but did give me a statement that simply read, quote, "We are cooperating with the authorities in their investigation," end quote. Though, if you listen to Commissioner Dwyer, they are not cooperating before the theft occurs. What should be done?
That's a question for the manufacturers. They've got to come up with infrastructure that you hate to say, hey, we got to reinforce your fencing around your lot, but they're driving through the one that you have right now, so we're going to have to do something. We can put all the trackers we want on these vehicles. The thieves know where the trackers are, and they'll tear them off 10 minutes after they steal the car. So we have to be able to make it more difficult for them to get their hands on these things. I would highly recommend that we make access to them a little more difficult.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but isn't that obvious? If you're thinking about those kinds of things as a manufacturer, as a company, wouldn't you think, well, we should make something that you can't drive a car through?
I mean, that would be a question for the manufacturers. And you got to remember too, Zach, is 12 cars out of how many million do they make? Sometimes that's the price of doing business, I guess you would say, but I wouldn't speculate, $20 million into securing a fenced lot when we only lose 12 cars. The thing that we all know is we have to make it tougher for thieves to get to these vehicles.
Maybe having the cars stolen in this way is just a drop in the bucket for Ford or Stellantis or whoever. But in failing to properly secure their vehicles, the automakers are putting an unnecessary strain on police departments in places like Warren and Flat Rock. And you know what? That's just not very neighborly. Thank you much to Kyle McPhee and Bill Dwyer for chatting with me today. This podcast would not be possible without the work of our digital team. Check out WWJNewsRadio.com for the top local news stories on demand 24/7. If you have questions, comments, or concerns about the Daily J, we want to hear them. Send us an email to dailyj@audacy.com. That's dailyj@audacy.com. Our theme music is written and produced by Ozone Music and Sound in Southfield. I'm Zach Clark, and this is the Daily J. Thanks for listening.